Hello, I'm Kurt Lidke, Executive Director of Klamath Film, and you just watched At the Video Store, a fantastic documentary profiling the ever disappearing culture behind video stores in our features category for the Klamath Independent Film Festival. Joining us now is the director of this film, James Westby. James, thank you so much for taking some time out to talk to us about this.
Thanks for having me. Thank you very much.
So, what made you want to make a film about video stores? Because this is something that most kids today would have no concept of. We have a teen in our house who looked stunned when I told him that when I was his age, YouTube didn't exist, much less, the concept of going to a store to check out a film. We may truly be the last generation pre-Netflix that will be able to even comprehend that kind of business model that people once had to go to a store to check out a movie, like going to a library.
Exactly. Well, I worked in video stores really young. Well, I was 19 when I got my first video store job, and I did a count not too long ago, and I actually have worked in 12 different video stores, mostly in Oregon, mostly here in Portland, Oregon, a couple in California. And I mean, I spent so much time at these places that I don't think I ever took it. I think a lot of people take for granted how hard it is to, without a video store, become a proper film nerd. As in, there's really still no way you can get on Amazon or on Netflix or Hulu and expect to, uh, especially with the fact that hardly any films pre, I think 1980 are even available on those streaming channels. So just that alone was enough to make me go, okay, I gotta. As a few stores started to die away back in 2012. One of them was called Video Verite here in Portland, and my friend Mark Mohan owned and operated it. And it was DVD only, but it was such a great resource. And as he started to, it was dawning on him that he had to go out of business. It was at least I wanted to archive, at least interview him and get some B-roll and just do a little short or something. And then that just kind of, kept going. And I interviewed the guy formerly the owner of Movie Madness, also here in Portland, Mike Clark, and just talked about the industry and how it's changing, and it just kind of kept snowballing. I kept meeting new people whose video stores were either going out of business or doing quite well, which Movie Madness, as we know, has done a lot better than a lot of them, thanks to crowdfunding and the like. But the initial idea was just the fact that I worked in so many stores, had so many stories, and I wanted to interview my friends and talk about the old days just in a really general way. And then it just started to get more specific with people cracking the right jokes, and those would make it into the film, or little certain stories would make it in. But a lot of it had to do with just personally. It was a very personal film. And Videorama, the store that I last worked in here in Portland, which also had a gym built into it, became a big part of the story. So it's all personal. And then wanting to propagate the idea of being that kind of film nerd that knows everything, that has seen every Boonwell film. There are like 50 of them, and you can't watch them online. I think maybe a couple, but that's a director that pops out to me because the director section at all the stores I worked at, his films were just all amazing, and they were all right there. You just had to pay for them and take them home, and then come back and get a bunch more.
So how did you go about researching for this film? I know this was a passion project that took many years, and you started with Portland stores, but it covers the entire country. So how did you go about tracking down all these still in business video stores and talking to people about them?
Yeah, it was usually just a person recommending somebody else who recommended somebody else. I got lucky enough to well, first profile a store in Seaside, Oregon, which is right on the coast, and there's a little store called Universal Video, and they're most maybe 80% VHS, because a lot of the people in those neighborhoods in Gearhart and these places with a lot of rental homes, a lot of them would just have VCRs, and still do just have VCRs. So people would actually go there and rent VHS tapes still, and this was just a few years ago, and they're still going strong. But Gus Van Sant was a patron of theirs and was a big fan of these two brothers who were really deadpan and funny. And so I got to know them first, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, Gus Van Sant comes in here." I'm like, "Wow, that's interesting." And then I had a friend who knew him, and he said, "Sure, I'll be interviewed." And I talked to him mostly about that store, and then a couple of the local ones, and then that led to getting John Waters in the movie because he was friends with him, and so every kind of celebrity type person that's in the film is in my movie kind of connected to a store. Like Todd Haynes I interviewed him in the Movie Madness Todd Haynes section, and he's on the board of the Hollywood Theater and Movie Madness, and so he was that was an obvious one. But Gus kind of goes with the Seaside store. John Waters with the store in Baltimore, which is one of my very favorite parts of the movie. Kind of the heartbeat of the movie, really. This older couple, Barry and Annie Solon in Baltimore. I filmed them right as they were going out of business, and I've stayed friends. I filmed them for maybe 6 hours on one day, and I've stayed friends with them for the last 5 years that I've known them. And it was actually a pleasure to show them the film when it played at the Alamo Draft House in Brooklyn, just right before the sky fell back in late February. But yeah, so it kind of just went from person to person, and I don't even know if I'd call it research, but it was just meeting folks, and then meeting somebody else, and also just wanted to go to New York because of the of Kim's video and the history there, and that led to tons more people appearing in the film. It was hard actually. There were probably 10 or 15 stores that I profiled that I'll have to put on the DVD or something because they just didn't make it into the movie.
I was curious about that because I imagine those who are in the know, those who have great passion for video stores and filmmaking in general, can
Mhm.
gush about it for hours on tape. So I expect interviewing someone like John Waters, it really doesn't take that much prompting. You just turn the mic on and let him roll, right? So like
Yeah,
the
of course
director's cut of this film could be like 4+ hours if you wanted it to.
he's a very famous orator. I don't know how much time he actually spent talking about video stores, but anything kind of goes when you're talking about, what you can get at a video store. You can start talking about your favorite movies, your favorite director. You can start talking about artwork on the VHS boxes. There's such a number of things that and of course the different formats over the years are always fun to chat about. I can have a conversation about laserdiscs all day.
I realize I'm part of the cult somewhat when it comes to being a film junkie, but this film really hit home for me. And I think anyone who grew up in the 80s and 90s, they have memories of the grungy local corner video store with rows of VHS tapes and the adults only beaded curtain in the
Yeah.
back. And the guy behind the counter, it sounds like you were one who could answer any question about any film ever made and provide those recommendations. Mine was a place called Flicks and Picks in Eugene. Now it's a pet food store.
Uh-huh.
But have you, at this point, after making this film, almost grown tired yet of people approaching you wanting to talk about their hometown video store after making this film? Because I imagine everybody who has that connection with that local store in that finite window when these were king has a story about theirs, and they immediately want to share and gush about, oh well, my store had this, and then there was this really weird guy who gave me this recommendation for this. And
I never get
do
tired
you
of
encounter
talking
that?
about that stuff. I could talk about it all day long. And it also goes into Hollywood video. That my film goes into Hollywood video, which I in advertising later worked for that corporation, making made a couple of like training videos for them. But that's neither here nor there. But no, I don't. I love the reason my movie doesn't have any lighting. It's just like I wanted it to just look and feel like you're in a grubby video store, which for the most part you are during the course of my movie. um, but no, I love those stories, and sometimes somebody will tell me a story about their store or working at Blockbuster or whatever that I wish I had filmed and put into the film into my movie. It could just
You
go
know,
on forever. I could just keep filming people.
there's an aspect of that you just touched on that's very true. Your film, in a way, feels almost claustrophobic
Mm,
in the way that as the camera moves in, there's all these just walls of DVDs and old VHS tapes. But that's the way those stores were, and I
mhm.
love the way that you present the atmosphere of what it was actually like. And for these few places still in operation, that it still is that way, where it feels like it's almost a hidden secret place to go. Was that intentional in the course of filming, or just the reality of the stores that you wanted to give the feel of what it's actually like to walk through those tight rows
Right.
of
Well, a lot of the
homes?
I've never really thought about that. I think it's by virtue of getting so much footage at so many stores. I always had the opportunity to cut to kind of whatever I wanted to. But certainly with the stores I worked in, I would vacuum the carpets. Some of them, anyway. Some of them you can tell have never been vacuumed. But I would, some of those stores. I look at that corner. I'm like, I remember vacuuming that corner every day for 3 years or whatever. So there is kind of a personal thing about it, wanting to just get the atmosphere down on film, on video, and present it to the world so that nobody forgets, what that was like. Of course, now obviously the movie takes another turn in that it presents movie madness here in Portland, and Scarecrow Video in Seattle as success stories in terms of being able to continue on because of their nonprofit status and that strange thing, man, the internet where all these people, overall, there's such a huge contingent of folks that obviously don't go to video stores anymore, and they get their movies online. But when there's a crowdfunder and people love that store, they really support it. And Scarecrow first, and then especially Movie Madness were big examples of that, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars to save these institutions and make them, become like a museum or like an archive or like a video store used to be, but just like they can get donations through their nonprofit status and things like that that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
It's interesting how people are tapping into that nostalgia aspect. I mean, the one last standing Blockbuster store just turned their store into an Airbnb as well,
Yeah,
and got a lot of publicity for that.
I saw that.
These stores are sadly disappearing by the day. Blockbuster is all but gone except for the one that's in Bend. Hollywood Video is no more, and after those businesses basically killed the mom and pops, now it's kind of interesting that the mom and pops are the ones still standing. So
Oh
do
yeah,
you
yeah,
kind
it,
of
it, yeah. It's analogous to a lot of things, but yeah, it was interesting that Blockbuster especially killed off so many stores. Like they have evil business practices, well known, well documented. And then those ones that stuck around, yeah, they have the last laugh. I mean, for the most part, absolutely.
Do you kind of revel in that? Because your film certainly celebrates the spirit of the little guy through the story
Mhm.
of the local video store.
Yeah. Well, my movie has a lot of scrappy little kind of pseudo sketches that I just kind of recreated little moments, like, but not super articulately. Just wanted them to be just kind of, as part of the atmosphere and part of the story. But my store, First Stop Video on Hawthorne Boulevard here in Portland, was literally taken over by Blockbuster while I worked there. Like we found out on one day that we were sold, and then the next day we were wearing Blockbuster's polo shirts. I luckily didn't stick around that long after that. I moved to LA and got a job at Rocket Video on La Brea, which turned out to be a great job and one of the best video stores at the time down there, along with Cinephile and Vidiots. But I came back. Everybody comes back. I came back to Portland and worked at Videorama. But yeah, Blockbuster in my movie is appropriately villainous, and
I
Hollywood Video, I have a little bit of a soft spot for because I did the training video in the film. I actually wrote and directed that, so it was funny to use my own corny, really starring really great actors from my previous films. They were the leads in it. My friend Melik, who acted in all my narrative films, which up until this point I'd never made a documentary film, just narratives and narrative comedy films. And he played every movie character that we could think of, like Wolverine, Borat. He played everybody, and it was kind of a surrealist, I should say, sort of training video. And I was, but sadly, sadly or ironically, they went out of business about 6 months later after I made that training video, their final training video.
I lived and worked in Hollywood for about 12 years, so I remember Vidiots very well, and a few of those other LA places that you mentioned. I was a regular patron to because there's just something about being able to walk through aisles and browse and take in not the Netflix recommendation, but the artwork. It's almost like, I mean, we still have movie posters, but the box art is almost like a lost art in of itself. Especially when you look back at the heyday of like the '80s horror films
Oh
when
yeah,
slashers were king. I mean, the the film might be terrible, but the box art was always incredible. I mean, just
always.
browsing through there, just as an art fan in general, do you feel like that's kind of a sad part of the industry that's going away now?
I do. And that store that you mentioned, Vidiots and Cinephile and La Video in San Francisco, which again doesn't exist anymore. Movie Madness or Scarecrow. Those are stores that are on another level in terms of their selection and even their design. And a lot of them have been there for so long. And I feel like not only the artwork from the films themselves on laserdiscs and VHS tapes, especially, even though DVD is my favorite format. I mean, and I love Blu-rays. I have a lot of Criterion Blu-rays right here. Um, but not only that, but also just the things that the staff does, like even behind the counter at Movie Madness, it's fun to just look at all the hand drawn little weird things, or somebody redrew a VHS box, or there's just little stickers everywhere. There's so many things that I think staff at video stores do that make it even more of a warm, welcoming, nerdy place to be.
I still have stacks of VHS tapes that are just off camera, sitting right over
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
So
me too. They really do. Literal sacks. And there's a store
Yeah.
in my movie called Great American Video and Espresso, which is a classic, just full on mom and pop store, and I love that. I don't know if equally, but I love that atmosphere just as much. It's I think it's the smell, and it's just the feel of the place. But that brings up a good point about a big part of my film is our combo shops. My store that I worked at Videorama was also a gym, which was a weird, strange amalgamation of jocks and nerds working together, and it didn't seem like it would work, but it did. And some of the trainers from the gym worked on the video side. Never vice versa. None of the video store clerks would know how to train anybody in a gym, but we did set up people with gym memberships. So there was a weird. It was just kind of a strange, dynamic that you don't see anywhere else. And this guy Kent McCarty, who started Great American Video and Espresso, he bought it when he was 18, and he moved it immediately into a U.S. bank building, which had a drive-through. And so the espresso that he had selling through that drive-through eventually saved his business, and now he has too much space for the videos because the store, the espresso, I think is like 90% of his business now.
Mm.
Whereas it wasn't that when it started. It was a thriving video business. And then there are a couple others. I can't think of the other combo shops. But well, actually, there's one in Chicago called Odd Obsession that sadly just went out of business, and he had a side business selling movie posters from Ghana. These Ghanaian movie
Mm.
posters that
Oh,
are amazing.
wow.
And he has a thing called Deadly Prey Gallery, which you might have heard of. You should check out their Instagram. It's really amazing. These Ghanaian artists making these paintings to advertise these movies that sometimes they've never even seen the movie or seen the box art, and sometimes it's insane. I mean, it's often insane, but really amazing work. I actually wanted to have them do the at the video store poster somebody from that group, but no.
You brought up something regarding the atmosphere, which is really distinct. Record stores had the same feel as these corner video stores, where it's a place where you could just go and hang out for like a couple of hours and sift through bins and talk about music or movies and your favorite this or that, and next thing you know, you were into a half-hour conversation behind the guy behind the counter. Um,
Hmm.
I've always felt that like Blockbuster stores had a unique smell that they could have almost patented. Like they could make a Yankee candle that
Hmm.
is Blockbuster store, because nothing has smelled quite like that before or since, and they all smelled exactly the same.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
don't know what they did, but somehow.
They could make it an air freshener or something. I'm
Yeah.
sure Taylor, the last Blockbuster director, has something like that in the works. You would think, just because you're right, it is distinct, and I think I wish I could remember the Hollywood smell and if it was that much more distinctive than or less than the Blockbuster one. But that's interesting. But yeah, the
It
Odd
was a
Obsession in Chicago was the best smelling and feeling store that I ever went.
it was an odd combo of like polo shirt, flop sweat, stale popcorn, um, fresh out of the styrofoam, boxes, kind of
Yeah, and
all
that,
blended
that
together to make
and
this.
and the shrink wrapping machine too
Yeah,
is always
yeah,
part
yeah,
of
did
it.
that well. So, outside of Klamath Independent Film Festival, where have you shown this film, and what kind of reactions have you received?
We had a little mini. Argo Pictures is our theatrical distributor, and we showed it. We premiered at the Bend Film Festival last October, and have since just been showing it around the country. I mean, until, like I said, until the pandemic hit in early March, we'd shown it at most of the Alamo Drafthouse theaters, which were great in L.A., Brooklyn, one in Arizona, and North Carolina. And I went to a couple of those screenings, and it was awesome. And the Seattle, all over Seattle. My parents live in Bellingham. Took it up there. Little collegey film towns, and and then we've had a couple fundraisers for a couple local venues that weren't doing so well for like a streaming fundraiser. And now it's on Alamo On Demand, which is the Alamo Drafthouse's streaming service.
Okay,
And
great.
we're
What
getting
kind
ready
of
to launch and you can actually get limited edition VHS tapes. This guy Lunch Meat
nice?
VHS, he's a big proponent of the movie and has kind of taken on the VHS creation duties. But those we do like a run of 50 of them, and then we're about to do another one. So it's a good collector's
Nice.
item, and it'll be on DVD in September.
As long as there's a "Be Kind, Please Rewind" sticker attached to it, it's sold for me. So,
Absolutely. Actually, do I have? Yeah, I have it right here. Here, you can see what it looks like. It's got a bunch of.
oh, perfect, perfect. Yeah, with all of the random stickers tossed. Oh, and you went with the early '80s style.
This guy, actually, this guy, Josh, aka Lunch Meat. You should look him up too. He's got a he's got a lot of cool stuff. He sells a lot of limited edition VHS stuff, and his
That
this
that
is and he has a book called Stuck on VHS, which is literally a kind of oral history of VHS stickers. So that's all it is. Pictures of VHS tapes with the stickers that you would find, and some of them are, of course, are the classic "Be Kind Rewind," but a lot of them are just bizarre, and or just even just the name of the video store, stuck on there. It's a really interesting collection.
so I mean that box brings back so many nostal. It has all the nostalgic feels.
Mhm.
The tendrils are tingling. Um, but
The
um,
clamshell helps. Starting with the clamshell.
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. We had a few of those when I was a very little kid
Yeah.
that I remember well. And then for a little while we had the betas as well
Hmm.
come in. But
Babies are so
as you
adorable. I have the beta tape for Brazil right here. It's so
oh
you can't,
nice.
don't think you can tell how little it is, but it's just a little tiny thing. And it was of course a superior format that was superseded by the cheaper uh, VHS or
Yep.
VCRs, but can't win them all.
So when you've taken this film around to little festivals, what kind of reactions have you gotten?
Oh, just big nerds. People want to know my favorite films, and I spit that out, ad nauseum. It's mostly that. It usually devolves into or evolves into a conversation about favorite movies, which I think is the whole point of the film. At least, like I said before, just being able to know that there is a place where you can have access to movies that you otherwise would never know about. And it often talks. We often people start talking about just the randomness of browsing and how important
Hmm.
that is. Something you'd never know existed, and then you just catches your eye. There's the
Yeah.
writer Charles Mudede. He writes for The Stranger in Seattle, and he tells a great story or a little anecdote about that very thing in the film, about finding a certain Taiwanese film that he had second thoughts about.
I imagine those who are in the know, those who have great passion for video stores can, always talk. We already talked about John Waters and Gus Van Sant, but uh, with this project taking years to produce and having those kind of connections that can lead to other connections, did you have to turn people away who had name recognition that wanted to come on camera to just gush
No,
about their
I didn't.
favorite stores?
I didn't have to turn anybody away, but I tried to connect with a few people, and it just didn't work out schedule wise. I think Darren Aronofsky was going to be in it at one point, and a couple other filmmaker type people who used to work in video stores.
Okay.
But a lot of them just it was kind of a couple of them like with Bill Hader, it was just kind of almost like a sad like, well, this store's going out of business. I'm making a documentary about this store, Allen's Alley, because this guy Allen in Chelsea, New York, had just the tiniest little. I shouldn't say tiny because it was so full. But it was just the most cram-packed video store you ever saw, and a cat lives in there, which is in the film. But Bill Hader went there when he was in his early stages of or his early years of Saturday Night Live, and so
Oh,
they
okay.
and his agent immediately said yes. So okay, that was easy. But I think I did
Your
appeal to to the heartstrings a little bit. It's like,
your
oh,
film
if you don't do this, you're a horrible person.
your film does a really great job of showcasing the nostalgia and making a point for the relevancy still today of these types of stores. But what is the future of these stores? Because we see the lone blockbuster store still surviving and making a name for itself in Bend, but the
Mhm.
mom and pops don't get the same recognition that that store does, and they're in the same boat. So do you see communities still embracing video stores?
I think it's one or the other. It's either a store like Great American Videos in Espresso. It's technically in Milwaukee, Oregon, but it's part of Portland. Embracing something else, bringing another component into their store. Not that it would work for everybody, but certainly coffee has saved that store because otherwise people just wouldn't go. It was just a video store. I don't think it would be. I don't know how you get folks. I try to get people. My daughters and I go to Movie Madness when they're open every week. Like every week, we always have their movies here, and it's something that you can't get streaming, and you can't. But it's something I don't own, obviously. I've accidentally rented things that I already own, but so it's either like Movie Madness or Scarecrow, or there's a Vidiot's I think was about to open again in the fall, which probably isn't going to happen for another year or so, I would think. But it's either those stores that were able to get embraced by everybody and become a nonprofit, and then they can just do whatever they want. They can just stay in business as long as they can meet their fundraising goals. There's that, or there's the combo shop. You like open up a pizza place inside your store and hope that brings people in. But it's really so hard to get people to be interested. And of course, preaching to the choir here, talking to you and anybody else who would probably go see this movie, that some people just aren't into physical media. They just don't care, and I care about it more than anything. These DVDs and VHS tapes, and especially my beloved Criterion Blu-rays are, they're everything. I freak
Yeah.
out when I borrow them, when somebody borrows them. I'm like, I got to write it down. It's a big deal, but it has to go back in that same spot. But a lot of people just don't care.
There's an aspect that if we lose these stores, I feel like we lose a chunk of history. And it's not just for the stores themselves, but it's film history because like you look at the way that things have changed. American movie classics used to be all black and white films all the time. I was force fed that by my dad growing up. I feel like I've watched about every silent movie and old 30s and 40s film that still exists. Now it's modern day stuff that they show. There's not really a place to find those old films anymore. If a
Yeah,
film isn't appearing on Netflix or Amazon Prime now, or isn't in those red boxes at grocery stores, it's like they almost don't even exist anymore. And there's this whole population growing up that are only going to know the mainstream films that are out there. So, does your film have a call to action for people to try to save this film history? And what do you hope that people take away from the film?
well, I mean, yeah, I think that is definitely one of the calls to action of the film, is to get people to seek out the stores that are still around and to embrace them and to actually go there and rent the movies and watch the movies. And it's funny what you said. I used to love AMC. AMC was like a segue into watching old movies, and then whatever wasn't on AMC, I would go and supplement, at the store. And it was a store I worked at, so I would, you'd bring home stacks of tapes, like huge stacks of tapes. But the old AMC, I saw all those Buster Keaton movies when they were first released on AMC. And it was such a big deal. And I was just talking to somebody about that the other day. But yeah, I mean, yes, the call to action for this movie, and without being, without being preachy or anything like that, or having a message to the movie. Mostly, I just want it to be a fun look back, and for folks who would never think about going into a store to rent a piece of plastic to, to watch later and then have to bring it back. To try to get them to embrace the idea and to actually understand that it's actually Bill Hader in the movie says it best when he's talking about it. It means something when you go in, you pay for it, and you got to watch it because you paid for it, and you got to take it back. So you got this finite amount of time to watch it, and even if you take it back late, it's still something that you paid for and have physically, and it just means more. You have more respect for it. I have
There's
everybody has tons of movies in their on their whatever list. I've had things on my Netflix queue forever that I'm still probably never going to watch.
there's it's so fascinating to look at things like we talked about music for a little bit there. Like when was the last time MTV showed a music video? And it's the same
Mhm.
sort of thing. You look at AMC or Turner Classic Movies, I guess, still show some stuff. IFC, all these channels that were built on showcasing all of the classical old films. I had a bit of a revelation the other day. I was trying to flip through channels, trying to find some classic films,
Mhm.
and now there's 50 different pay channels for HBO and Cinemax and all that, and they're all showing this basically the same 20 films. It was a struggle to try to find an old film from the
Yeah.
30s, 40s, or 50s, and
I
these
think
days,
TCM's your only bet, really. I think
yeah,
there
yeah.
are a
I mean,
couple. There are a couple of really low budget streaming channels that I'll find on my Roku, and they'll have movies that are in the public domain. Really terrible copies of Beat the Devil, the John Huston film, or something like that that's been somebody forgot to copyright it, or His Girl Friday. But other than that, you just don't see it, and it's really sad because Billy Wilder and all those guys that's my favorite era of film, is 40s and 50s for sure,
You
especially.
almost have to just hope that someone has put it up on YouTube somewhere where you can still check it out online, because there's just
Yeah,
those channels just stopped showing old films, and it's like we are whitewashing history away of the history of film. It's really
it's
sad
true.
and tragic to me.
It's really
So,
tragic.
do you have any final thoughts regarding your film that you would like people to know?
I don't know. I mean, I like that it's a. I like to that not to let people know how to watch it or something, but it does. I'm proud of the fact that it doesn't feel like a normal movie. That it's like a scrappy collage of a film, and it's been fun to put it together that way. One of my big influences, strangely, it's not as much of a film nerdy answer, but Stacy Peralta's films with the Bones Brigade. I grew up a
Hmm.
skateboarder, and all I did was watch the Bones Brigade movies. Search for Animal Chin, the Bones Brigade video show, all those, and they were all just really fun. They were documentaries, but they had these dumb little sketches and some songs
Hmm.
written for the film or for
Yep.
the video, and just stupid and immature and brilliant. And those movies, I think, influenced the aesthetic of this more than probably anything, which is kind of odd. And of course,
Well,
a lot of low budget, documentaries, but a lot of them are about skateboarders.
yeah, I watched the Bones Brigade documentary not too long ago, and that actually inspired me to go back and rewatch Gleaming the Cube, which a lot of those kids are in. Boy, that film has not aged very well, but
Oh man,
there's still
all my
something kind
friends
of
back,
fun.
I think it was 87 or 88. All my friends
Yeah,
went and saw it. Right, Tony Hawk and Mike McGill and all those guys were going to be
yeah.
professional players, stunt double. He had Rodney Mullen and Mike McGill like doubling him, and he literally did like a 540 off like a freeway barrier, which everybody knows would never happen. Although now, who knows? Skateboarders like magicians now. It's insane. But yeah, Gleaming the Cube is hilarious, and it was directed
It
by a guy who used to edit Robert Altman's films.
it was
So,
a fun little nostalgic romp, but at the same time, it's sitting there like this has not aged well at all. And
but the uh, the uh,
most '80s
but the
films
Bones
haven't, but
Brigade,
that one really didn't.
yeah, that Bones Brigade and autobiography, though, is a masterpiece. It's so good,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
it features little clips of every skate video that I watched as a kid, so I knew every single little snippet of B-roll in that movie, and I've seen it like 50 times.
Well, thank you, James, for this very fun talk. And in
Thank you.
addition to
It
being
has been fun.
available all weekend long via Eventive, people can check out your film at the video store and in person at the Ross Raglan Theater here in Klamath Falls on Saturday, September 19th. At the video store is going to kick off our Saturday run of all-day features starting at 11 a.m. for the 8th annual Klamath Independent Film Festival. So, James, thank you so much for the time. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
making this fantastic film and all the nostalgic feels that it created. And we look forward to whatever your next project may be. I guess 7 years in the making, right?
I've got a couple that I've been working on for a while, but I'm gonna put them to bed a lot earlier, I think.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much. And thank you for making at the video store.
Thanks a lot, man.